I want you to know that it's not their fault. The fact that people are not politically involved, not even politically aware, is not their fault. Over decades, social engineers have induced us into a trance, a zombie trance, where black is white and white is black, using every means at their disposal. We have been conditioned with propaganda to believe that everything we are told by an authority figure simply must be the truth. For decades, we have based our perception of society and life in general on what we have been told by these authority figures. No longer are we inquisitive creatures. No longer do we seek to find the answers out for ourselves. No longer do we look to verify what we are told. If the man on the telly said it, or if a government representative said it, then it unequivocally must be true. The general public have forgotten to think for themselves. Their opinions are someone else's, regurgitated without proper thought process. Their arguments have no depth. Critical thinking has disappeared. For years, we as a society have been told to buy, spend. We have continually been offered cheap money, offered great deals to remortgage the house, to buy that second home, or that new car, or to ensure that we have the latest gadgets. We are told almost everywhere we look, in films, TV, magazines, books, on the radio, that in order to be somebody, to have achieved something, for people to look up to us, to be able to have self-respect, that we needed to have loads of stuff. Worshipping celebrities and sports stars has become the new religion. Having a photo of yourself with a so-called celebrity is the new holy grail. Following your favourite celebrity or sports star on Twitter so you can endlessly find out when they take a dump and what they had for breakfast in less than 140 characters seems to be the highlight of most people's lives. Twitter has become the mecca of the Western world. Narcissism has become the norm. Who needs neighbours? Who needs their community? X Factor, Britain's Got Talent, anything that gives you instant fame, instant recognition, instant money to get more stuff is now overwhelmingly popular, together with so-called reality TV. The likes of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, Strictly Come Dancing, The Only Way is Essex, Scouse Wives, despite being awful and insulting in content, are jazzed up and pushed in the mainstream media as it's what the public want.
Easy. It's like, we start off, it's all like nice and glamorous dancing, by the end of the night it's like skank out.
You're gonna skank out?
Best thing in the world, I'd probably marry it.
And of course us, the girls.
I've only been out with one footballer.
Do we, as the public, really want this tripe pushed on us? Do we? Honestly? Or is all this tittle-tattle just a distraction, pushed by the corporate mainstream media to shield us from real-world events, from what is really happening, from the corporate and governmental corruption that is there for us all to see, but only if we're willing to look? In 2012, the establishment is attempting to condition the general public into believing that anyone who has an opinion that differs from the government is somehow weird, that they have something wrong with them, that they are an extremist, a conspiracy theorist, or even a terrorist recruiter, and not to be trusted, regardless of the actual facts available. Nothing could be further from the truth. In 2010, the UK government think tank Demos, that regularly hosts speeches by senior politicians, including prime ministers, released survey results that concerned them greatly. Demos believe that children between 12 and 15 years old are being led astray by conspiracy theories that they read online. These children then have the audacity to question what they are being taught in the classroom. Demos have suggested fighting back against such conspiracy theories by infiltrating the so-called conspiracy websites to dispute conspiracy theories, thus increasing trust in government. The US government have recently tried to pass bills in the Congress called SOPA and PIPA to allow the US president access to close any website he wants under copyright rules. The infiltration of conspiracy websites by governments and then bringing down any website they choose using copyright as the excuse to increase trust in government would not be necessary if the governments told the truth once in a while. Remember weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? Remember Iraq being able to launch missiles within 45 minutes? Remember the Downing Street memos? Remember the covered-up murder of Dr. David Kelly? Remember we were only offered a narrative about the events on 7/7, the government basically telling us their story and what they wanted us to hear.
Just to get this right, you are actually working today on an exercise that envisioned virtually this scenario.
Almost precisely. I was up until 2 o'clock this morning because it's our job. My own company, Advisor Consultants, we specialise.
Remember the promises about an EU referendum by Blair, then Brown, then Cameron, all lies.
In 2005, all of the major political parties promised a referendum on the European Constitution. It gives the European Union the right to sign treaties and to pass new treaties, new constitutions, without asking us again, the people of Europe. That's why it's important, that's why it matters. I think it's...
Remember being told Gaddafi was strafing crowds of his own people? This was the action that prompted the UN to pass its no-fly zone. Well, according to the Russians, this never happened.
Well, the reports of Libya mobilising its air force against its own people spread quickly around the world. But Russia's military chief says they've been monitoring from space, and the pictures tell a different story. Well, RT's Irina Galushko can tell us more on this now.
According to Al Jazeera and to BBC, on the 22nd of February, Libyan government has inflicted airstrikes on Benghazi, the biggest city in the country, and on Tripoli. And according to Russia's military, they have not registered any of those airstrikes. According to them, the pictures show that nothing of that sort has been going on the ground. Now, if we also focus on the pictures, on the footage that
we are told the NHS reforms will improve services, and that it's not just about making private companies and shareholders richer. Honestly, we are told the government will clamp down on tax cheats. In 2010 alone, Britain lost £35 billion in uncollected taxes. But what do you expect when the Chancellor George Osborne himself uses tax loops to avoid paying £1.6 million in taxes owed?
Because we are all in this together. All in this together. All in this together.
The government have told us time and time again that they will clamp down on banker bonuses. Yet in early 2012, much was made of Stephen Hester, head of Royal Bank of Scotland, 84% taxpayer owned, getting close to £1 million in bonus for a dismal failure. He missed his lending targets, he's reduced the company share price by 40% in the last 6 months, and he's axed 33,000 jobs in 3 years. Governments lie. It's what they do. You might wonder how politicians who back government lies continue to get re-elected time and time again. Despite having a proven track record of misleading the public, these politicians still get another 4 years of late night drinks with colleagues, evenings out paid for by the expenses. They get to travel the world at the taxpayers' expense. And how exactly do they get away with this? Well, I would like to say that it's because the general public are only half paying attention, but in reality, they are hardly paying attention at all. After all, they've got tweets to send and a Facebook status to update. Here is an example of the disdain shown to the general public by members of Parliament. After sulking for a few months because he didn't win the Labour leadership, David Miliband toyed with the idea of a television career whilst continuing as an MP. Instead, he took a lucrative job with a Pakistani-based city firm whilst being an MP, which could potentially earn him £500,000. Money that is being paid into a company, so Miliband won't have to pay the 50% rate of tax. His new role is not expected to occupy more than a few days a month. Oh, how nice. Will he be refunding his wages to the taxpayer for the days that he is moonlighting for this other company? I thought being an MP was a full-time job. Governments and politicians get away with this because of spin. They pretend everything they do is for the good of society. And as long as we are told that what they are doing is positive, people can go back to sleep and not get involved because everything is being taken care of. The most infamous spin doctor of recent history was Tony Blair's Director of Communications between 1997 and 2003, Alistair Campbell. His spin was responsible for us going to war against Iraq and over 1 million Iraqis being killed. An excellent example of modern day spin came in 2011 when the United Nations introduced Resolution 1973, creating a no-fly zone over Libya because it was alleged Gaddafi was strafing his own people. Who would have thought that a no-fly zone actually meant authorization to bomb a country back to the Stone Age, with over 14,000 bombing sorties and over 30,000 innocent civilians killed. More spin, more death. Resolution 1973 clearly stated that there were to be no NATO ground invasion of Libya. So just exactly who did NATO have on the ground assisting them in the overthrow of Colonel Gaddafi? Why Al-Qaeda, of course. Zbigniew Zabrinski's favourite puppet army, the go-to guys of the military-industrial complex. Now Gaddafi has fallen, the new head of the Tripoli Military Council is none other than the infamous Abdul Hakim Belhaj, who was a friend of Osama bin Laden, a former US prisoner of war, and an infamous Al-Qaeda killer of US and UK soldiers in Afghanistan. That's right, the very same Al-Qaeda that we were trying to eliminate in Afghanistan and Iraq, the same guys the corporate media tell us were responsible for 9/11 and 7/7 and many other attempted bombings, the guys who hate us because of our freedoms, well, they were leading the ground assault on Gaddafi and receiving training, support, weapons and money from NATO. Al-Qaeda were even flying flags over the courthouse in Benghazi. This information is documented fact, but because the man on the telly or Simon Cowell hasn't discussed it, the general public simply will not believe you. It's just incredible that in airports in the Western world we are introducing cancer-causing naked body scanners and having intrusive body searches in the name of saving us from Al-Qaeda. Here we have a situation where Al-Qaeda good in Libya, everywhere else Al-Qaeda bad. An arm of Al-Qaeda, the Muslim Brotherhood, have even had certain members granted top secret security clearance by the head of Homeland Security in America, Janet Napolitano. We are currently experiencing the worst financial meltdown since the 1930s, possibly ever. Millions have lost their jobs, millions are unable to find work, austerity has blanketed Europe, and the standard of living in the UK has reduced quicker than any time since the 1920s.
As a result, in 2011, real wages are likely to be no higher than they were in 2005. One has to go back to the 1920s to find a period in which real wages fell over 6 years.
The financial global collapse of 2008 resulted in the collapse of large financial institutions, the now infamous bailing out of banks, a lot of banks, by national governments, and a downturn in the stock markets around the world. In the UK, we bailed out Northern Rock for 1.4 billion. We also spent 76 billion to buy shares in Lloyds TSB and Royal Bank of Scotland. We provided 200 billion of lender of last resort liquidity support, 250 billion of wholesale lending, 185 billion of loans to special liquidity schemes, 40 billion to Bradford and Bingley, 200 billion of liabilities in an asset protection scheme, and 275 billion in quantitative easing. Since the collapse in 2008, the UK government has been liable for over £1.2 trillion of bankers' debt. This is why the claims recently in the UK that the debt has surpassed £1 trillion for the first time is laughable. The Institute of Economic Affairs says the figure is closer to £4.8 trillion when all liabilities are taken into account. That's approximately £78,000 for every man, woman and child in the UK. Most people who consider the daily propaganda churned out by the corporate media to be news will have no idea the banking collapse could cost the UK taxpayer upwards of £1.2 trillion, and they certainly won't have any idea that the global financial industry has become one big gigantic casino now backed by the taxpayer. Global megabanks are making tens of billions of dollars a year in the derivatives market, and despite the global financial collapse causing a collapse in the real economy, the bankers don't want this party to end. At the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2011, the world's bankers said they needed a further 100 trillion in liquidity backed by us, the taxpayer, to keep their casino-style way of doing business going, obviously in the name of economic growth, and of course this would keep their billions in bonuses flowing. The word derivative sounds complicated and technical, but understanding it is really not that hard. A derivative is essentially a fancy way of saying that you have laid a bet. Originally these derivatives were designed to hedge against risk, but today the derivatives market has grown into a mountain of speculation unlike anything the world has ever seen before. What happens if you or I place a bet and it loses? We lose our stake, we kick the cat. But if you work for a bank in the city, wear an expensive suit, are deemed too big to fail, and call your bets derivatives, then you have seemingly unlimited funds, as your government will bail you out any losing bets, regardless of how reckless you've been over the previous years. Isn't it ironic that we are constantly told that if banks don't pay huge bonuses and huge salaries, all the banking talent will leave and go abroad? Well, bailout after bailout would suggest there hasn't been a lot of banking talent in the industry. Let them sod off abroad because their performance to date seems to have been abysmal as far as I can tell. Banks are collapsing, not because of a few dodgy mortgage loans. They're collapsing and needed to be bailed out because of their derivatives debt. Royal Bank of Scotland had over £2.2 trillion in derivatives debt alone. That's one bank in one country. The Bank of International Settlements, dubbed the central bank's central bank, has stated the world's GDP is around $63 trillion. It states the global derivatives market is currently standing at over $707 trillion, and some report it being as high as $1.5 quadrillion. That's 1,500 trillion dollars. The BIS tell us that the derivatives market increased 18% in the first 6 months of 2011. Are the bankers going for broke, making hay while they still can?